It's the start of June. The sun is shining and the birds are chirping. England's pleasant green land is well worth exploring, especially in the Marston Vale. This is the name that refers to an area of land between the M1 motorway at Ridgemont to the small village of Kempston and the town of Bedford. Once, the land was dominated by the London Brick Company, whose scars are left for all to see from the large tracts of land where clay pits were dug. Included is the former factory at Stewartby, abandoned and looking dishevelled. It gives us all an idea of what used to be here from the decades of industrial activity. A train is spotted running through this rural backwater of Bedfordshire on a service bound for Bedford. This is the Marston Vale line, a community railway that runs between Bedford and Bletchley, once a part of the so-called Varsity line between Oxford and Cambridge. Since 2006, the railway has been designated a community line by the Marston Vale Railway Society in a bid to encourage the locals along the line to use the trains more and getting involved in the community. In order for them to get people involved, the partnerships use a range of different ideas by holding community events, special trains, publishing the line in magazines or newspapers, and displaying posters at certain stations. They hope to ensure improvements for existing rail users and anticipate a long, stable financial future for the line. For well over 100 years, steam has at one point been witnessed on the branch line for destinations beyond Cambridge and Oxford, only later to be replaced by diesel multiple units. After the closure of the through route between Oxford and Cambridge, DMUs such as Class 117s had been regularly seen calling at the local stations, in addition to the single Class 121s. The slam door fleet had been on the branch well into the days that the railways were privatised in 1996. Soon, they began to be operated by the Silverlink. In 2007, 11 years later, the franchise ended, becoming London Midland. Class 150 DMU from the Central Trains franchise had been transferred down to work the route. A single-car Class 153 unit was also transferred down from the West Midlands area to work alongside the 150 fleet. Both units remained on the branch line, even when the franchise rolled over once more to West Midlands trains in 2017. Right up until April 2019, when they were finally displaced by the brand new Class 230D trains. In fact, the term brand new is a bit of an understatement because the trains have been in service since 1980, as they have been on the London Underground as D78 stock trains. The electric trains ran off a 630-volt DC4 rail system and exclusively used on the District line between Ealing Broadway, Richmond, Wimbledon and Upminster. Built by Metro Camel in Birmingham, their unique feature that they held was the passenger-operated single-leaf doors, a concept to allow for passengers to board and alight more quickly than from the wider than normal doors. Between 2003 and 2008, the D-Stock had a midlife refurbishment modifying the train by painting the outsides of the coaches with a bright colour scheme, adding end-of-car windows for passenger security and rearranging the seating interiors. After 35 years of service, the trains were replaced by a brand new build of sub-service stock, known as the S-Stock. The last D-Stock train ran on the 21st of April 2017. However, the previous year, Vivarail had purchased 156 driving motor cars, and 70 trailer vehicles, so that they could be converted to diesel-electric multiple units. It was within the same year that West Midlands Trains had announced they would purchase 3 two-car D trains to run on the Marston Vale line. Months later, after much route testing and driver and guard familiarisation learning, the first Class 230D train entered service on the 23rd of April 2019. Each driving motor is fitted with a 3.2 litre 5-cylinder diesel engine that are manufactured by Ford from South Africa. It seems the community is a lot happier with the new trains as they feature creature comforts such as air conditioning, audio announcements and brighter interiors. The seating arrangements have changed with some longitudinal and transverse seating for all passengers, plug and USB sockets for passengers to charge their mobile phones and laptops, a dot matrix LED system displaying the name of every station, and this wide, airy space to accommodate disabled passengers, etc. On the side of the interiors of the trains are small posters depicting various points of interest to all the passengers, as well as a brief history on the line and the train. The single-leaf doors have also remained on the trains, albeit only 4 remain on the driver motor coaches, but the most striking innovation is the retention toilet, a colourful, abstract design by Alicia Miller. Who would have thought of such an invention that would have been employed on a London Underground train? It's now time to take a ride, and we start our journey at the northern tip of the branch in the county town of Bedfordshire. The station at Bedford is managed by Thameslink, which is the northern terminus for their route towards Brighton and Gatwick Airport. Services are provided by 8 or 12 car Class 700 to 0 EMUs. The station sits on the Midland Main Line, and although trains go roaring through here over 100 miles per hour, East Midlands Railway delivers a half-hourly service to either Nottingham or Corby from London St Pancras. Services are run by Class 222 Meridian DMUs. Our train arrives on platform 1A, adorned in the livery of London North Western Railway, an operating brand under the West Midlands train umbrella. Bedford has had many names over the years, firstly simply called Bedford in 1859, then Bedford Midland Road in 1924, Bedford Midland in 1978, and finally reverting back to plain Bedford again in 1988. With the guard having closed all the doors to the train, they give 2 on the buzzer to the driver, giving the right of way. In response, the driver gives 2 back. The Midland Main Line continues ahead towards Luton, St Albans and ultimately St Pancras. The overhead power lines that are ostensibly rated at 25 kilovolts AC run along with the main line having been electrified as far north of here in 1983. Our train wends its way around the sides of the Thameslink carriage slidings where we can see certain Class 700 units stabled here. At milepost 16 and a half, measured from Bletchley, we pass a sign that reminds Thameslink drivers that the electric trains have no access to the up and down Bletchley lines as it becomes unelectrified. The former up line is still electrified but retained as a head shunt for the dual-set carriage sidings. Both lines cross over the Great Ouse River. We are now on the route taken by the original Midland Main Line, built in 1859, from Bedford to Hitchin, for trains to continue to King's Cross via the East Coast Main Line. Midland Railway trains ran along with the Great Northern steam services. However, at times of disruption, this normally meant that the former suffered the most. Fed up of the way the Great Northern treated them, as they took precedence, the Midland decided to build their own London extension from Bedford. The Royal Assent was passed for the London extension in June 1863 and took 5 years to construct, with services beginning to London St Pancras on the 1st of October 1868. We arrive at the first station on the branch, Bedford St John's, opened on this site in 1984, when it was reopened from the original spot on the Oxford-Cambridge line to serve the Midland station. The first station opened in 1846 and was located to the west of the current site on the A600 London Road, sitting within an industrial estate. That station closed in 1967 with the line's demise. As it was the first station in the town, it had just been called Bedford, remaining so until 1924, with the suffix St John's being added to avoid puzzlement with the Midland station. The route to Hitchin once continued straight ahead and remained in use for certain passenger and goods train until 1961 and 1964 respectively. We curve away from that alignment onto what was a triangular junction with the Varsity line with a 15 miles per hour maximum. Now we join the formation of the Oxford-Cambridge line, regaining the double track as far as Fenny Stratford. The maximum line speed is 60 miles an hour, and as such the maximum speed limit for our train. The Varsity line was a London and North Western Railway cross-country line from Oxford Rewley Road to Cambridge. The first stretch of this line is the route we are taking today, built by the London and Birmingham Railway, as they wanted to fight off any efforts either made by the Great Western or Midland Railways, who wanted to construct routes into Oxfordshire and the Midlands. Under the command of George Stephenson, since 1844, the railway opened piecemeal, and this section of the line opened from Bletchley to the old Bedford St John station on the 17th November 1846. A few months before the opening, the L&B was amalgamated with the Grand Junction Railway to form the LNWR. Routes towards Oxford opened in 1851 and to Cambridge 11 years later. Things were looking good, with the full route being a huge success, but in 1967 the line from Bletchley to Oxford and Bedford to Cambridge succumbed to the beaching axe. We pass underneath the Midland Main Line, and beyond it we see a crossing keeper's house, positioned right next to the railway. This was the site of Kempston and Elstow Halt, which was opened by the LNWR in 1905, when the company introduced a steam rail motor service. It was officially closed in 1949. Just to our right is a sign displaying the number 30 with a cross next to it. Wrong direction speed restriction boards are positioned on the approach to level crossings that have wrong direction controls. The speed of the train must be controlled so the train complies with the speed shown between the board and the crossing. This is Kempston Hardwick, reported in 2003 as the quietest station in England, with only 38 passengers a month boarding and alighting here. The station is really located in the middle of nowhere, and its survival can be all thanks from the former Eastwoods brickworks that was located nearby. On the opposite side of the level crossing, next to milepost 12, was the site of Wootton Broadmead Halt. It was unusual as it didn't serve any populous area with that name. The nearest dwelling was Stewartby. It closed in 1941, never reopening to passengers, though it's surprising that the halt remained standing for another 11 years, with no purpose, before being officially closed in 1952. A rare sight to see a Class 37 diesel locomotive sitting in Forder's siding, once an important siding controlling the heavy movements from the works. What we saw earlier is the remains of the brickworks at Stewartby. This was one of the main brick-making districts in the country, and we could have seen hundreds of chimneys erected over the Marston Vale, polluting the air with a large amount of smoke gushing from the furnaces. Reports tell of a 2-foot and 11-inch tramway that used to connect all the brickworks and factories together in the area, but can't have been popular as it had a lifespan of 30 years from the 1930s. Wootton Pilnage Halt, as it was known before Stewartby, was in a particularly rural zone, with the nearest village being over a mile away at Marston Moortine. The station was renamed in 1935 by the LMS and is also the closest station to Kimberley College. The small model village was founded in 1926, taking its name from Sir Halley Stewart, who was the first chairman of the Wootton Pilnage Brickmaking Company. The area is affluent, attracting the wealthy who own homes or come to retire here, and since the 2011 census vaunts a population in excess of 1,200. A survey in the 1970s found that nearly 20% of England's bricks were produced in Bedfordshire, with 135 million of them being created every year. Most of the factories had used Oxford clay made up of seaweed, formed hundreds of millions of years ago when it was on a seabed. As a result of this, it reduced the need to use large volumes worth of coal to light fire in the kilns. Now we pass alongside the Rookery Energy Recovery Facility, who process waste that cannot be used or recycled to generate clean energy. The site had been built upon a past Brickley extraction pit, with its partners being Covanta and Viola. We are now arriving at Millbrook, one of the 4 stations on the line that have the traditional buildings located on the up platform, making it an original opening with the line. The station has been variously known as Marsden, Ampthill, Ampthill Marsden and Millbrook for Ampthill between 1846 and 1877. The current title came to light in 1910. It's also nice to see that someone is tending to the tubs of flowers on the platforms, including these old railway signs, a time warp. A major scheme has begun to reopen the line from Oxford to Cambridge, called the East-West Rail Project, connecting East Anglia with the central, southern and western parts of England. Phase 1 of the western section of the line reopened passengers from Oxford via Bicester to make a junction with the Chiltern Main Line, providing the second route to London in December 2016. The mothballed section from Bicester to Bletchley is the next on the tick list to reopen, so the route can allow trains to run from Oxford to Bedford via Bletchley and thus create a new service from Milton Keynes or Bedford to London Marylebone. Construction is due to start in 2019 and be completely functional by 2023. This is Marsden Automatic Half Barrier Crossing. Notice the old platform and station building as we arrive in Lidlington, probably the first inhabited community around the station since Bedford. If you have ever missed the train and must wait an hour until the next, why not go and explore the pretty village itself? The attractive church in the village centre points to the fact that it was designed by the Duke of Bedford in 1845. Lidlington is set at the southern end of the Vale's basin, accommodating a population today of 1,300. There's a nostalgic sound of the motor on the train, which provides the audible noise reminiscent of the underground. England's green and pleasant land. The crossover on the approach to Ridgemont is retained for emergencies only. To the right of the station in the porter cabins is the Marston Vale signalling centre that controls our route from just after Bedford St to Fenny Stratford. We pass the down train. Third train out of the consist is normally stabled at the Bletchley track maintenance depot. Ridgemont's classic station building has been built in the cottage-orn agricultural style and was totally refurbished by a small charity in 2014. A small tea room and gift shop have been provided here, with the past ticket office being converted into a small heritage centre. The line points southwest and passes underneath the M1 motorway. Here was the location of Hunsbourne Crawley, opening in 1905 and closing in 1941. Berry Lane level crossing has been designated as a UWC, found in the Network Rail sectional appendix as a user work crossing. This type of crossing is protected by gates, normally closed across the road and hung, so to open away from the railway which is operated by the users. At this one, telephones have been provided, and the user is expected to call the signaller, who will advise whether it is safe to cross the line. Once it is safe to do so, with no trains approaching, the gates should be opened and the crossing done in one movement. In some circumstances, it may also be necessary for other types of users, for example, pedestrians, to telephone before crossing. Aspley Guise was opened when the steam rail motor service was introduced on the 30th of November 1905, built from the usage of old railway sleepers. The up platform was rebuilt and lengthened by British Rail in 1959. At the time of the railway grouping, when all the railways in Great Britain were split into 4 main regions, the Marston Vale came under the control of the London Midland and Scottish. It was later passed on to the London Midland region of British Rail at the time of nationalisation in 1948. Woburn Sands station building is a third out of the 4 to have the distinctive Gothic revived design. An extensive goods yard used to operate here, servicing many brickworks and gas factories from 1871 to 1967, controlled by a signal box that once stood at the end of the station. It was removed in 2004 as part of the line's modernisation programme. Close from the station is Woburn, a pretty little village with a population of 2,916 since the census in 2011, and is very close to the Woburn Abbey estate. Currently, still the main residence for the Duke of Bedford, there has been a building on this site since 1145, when a Cistercian monastery was founded in the surrounding park and woodlands. The abbey was destroyed by King Henry VIII as part of his pledge to form his own Church of England and rid of any Roman Catholic worshipping grounds. The splendid building today dates from around 1744, hosting the long line of the Duke of Bedford's to this day, and is a Grade 1 listed building. Meanwhile, back on the railway. The entire layout of this cab can be best appreciated from these shots. As we can see, the train has been completely modernised so it can adjust to the Network Rail signalling system. A notable feature seen on the line at certain stations is the staggered platforms on either side of the level crossings. The benefit of having this arrangement is so that the road traffic at the crossing are not held up by trains waiting at the station. Brickhill was one of the many stations on the branch that opened on the 30th of November 1905, after a steam rail motor service was introduced. The station had closed in 1915 to 1917 during World War I as an economy measure. The line now becomes single for the last mile towards the terminus. This is where we cross over the A5 Milton Keynes bypass. As we cross over the Grand Union Canal, one can see the former double-track infrastructure. The level crossing is designated as an FBC, standing for Full Barrier Crossing. Here we arrive at the penultimate station, Fenny Stratford, that opened with the line in 1846. The station building is the fourth on the line to be built in a distinctive design, insisted by the 7th Duke of Bedford, using a half-timbered Gothic Revive style, as the station was not far from his home at Woburn Abbey. Goods were withdrawn from the station in 1967, and the station became an unstaffed halt the following year. This is Bletchley Flyover Junction, which was used as a link for freight trains to continue south on the line to Oxford and dates from the 1950s. One wonders how long this old wagon made its last journey here, as trees have now grown from within it. The short single line section is now under the jurisdiction of Rugby's Rail Operating Centre. Over to our right is the traction maintenance depot, the stabling facility for the 230s. The dormant Bletchley flyover is trackless, but will be relaid for the future East-West Rail project, permitting trains from Marylebone to join Denby Hall South Junction and continue towards Milton Keynes Central. Ahead is the West Coast Main Line. The 401-mile-long route is the busiest in the country, the main artery of the route to Glasgow. This is Bletchley East Junction, where the line from the stabling sidings converge just before we arrive at platform 5 to terminate. Bletchley is also one of the main train crew depots and has roughly over 100 workers based here. The station is roughly 45 miles to the north of London Euston on the West Coast Main Line. Therefore, cross-platform interchange is provided for passengers heading southwards on platform 4. Passengers from Milton Keynes, Northampton and Birmingham need to cross the footbridge to platform 3. Our train will sit here for 25 minutes before it returns down the Marston Vale line to Bedford. Bletchley is the home of the Codebreakers, the mansion of Bletchley Park being only a short stroll away from the station. The impressive building dates from 1883. During World War II, this is where the famous Codebreakers were sighted for the British Army, who worked in this top-secret location at the time. These remarkable machines would eavesdrop on the German and Italian forces, foiling any attempts for an attack on British soil. At its peak, over 10,000 people worked here during the war, some of who were mathematicians, linguists, or even crossword experts. These men and women, mostly British and a few Americans, are credited for their achievement for not only their skills, but also for shortening the war by 2 years. The machines even continued in operation through D-Day and the fall of Berlin. It's without no doubt that Gordon Welchman, the man responsible for the electromechanical equipment, is honoured, as if it wasn't for him, the top-secret German Enigma codes may never have been broken. His legacy continues to this day with a more advanced technology, and to identify him as a hero of World War II, a statue has been placed here within the park. The old station buildings have now gone, replaced by modern ones. Nothing is forever. What can be said, however, is that the Marston Vale line will continue providing a passenger service, especially those who are dedicated to the line to make it an enjoyable experience. High praise indeed.